It began like every ordinary evening in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where children played outside until sunset and families left their doors unlocked, trusting the sense of safety that had built up over the years. No one imagined that behind one particular door, inside a house filled with laughter, framed family portraits, and warm memories, something so dark was quietly unfolding, something so chilling it would shatter the illusion of a perfect home forever. This is the story of the Carter family. To everyone who knew them, they were the very definition of a happy, unified, loving household. A couple who adored each other, 2 children thriving in school, and a home that felt warm and inviting even to visitors. But as we've learned from many tragic stories, appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the most devastating secrets hide behind the brightest smiles. This case would soon reveal that underneath the calm surface of family life, there were cracks no one had noticed, or perhaps no one wanted to notice. On a cold Friday night, a sudden scream echoed across the neighborhood. It was sharp, quick, and filled with a terror that made 2 neighbors stop mid-conversation. They peered toward the Carter residence, confused but alert. Minutes later, a loud crash followed. Then silence, the kind of silence that sends chills down your spine. One neighbor stepped forward, unsure whether to investigate or call someone first. But within minutes, the choice would be made for everyone. A frantic 911 call came from inside the house. A trembling voice, barely audible, whispered the words, "Please help, something terrible has happened." And then the line went dead. By the time police arrived, the house seemed eerily calm. The lights were on. The front door was slightly open. Nothing looked disturbed from the outside. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. But the moment officers stepped in, they sensed something was very wrong. The living room was spotless. A half-finished board game lay on the coffee table, as if the family had just been there minutes before. A TV show paused mid-scene on the screen. The air smelled faintly of dinner, still cooling in the kitchen. It was like the world inside the house had frozen in time. But what made the officers' hearts pound was the faint sound coming from the hallway, a soft, rhythmic knocking, as if someone was tapping, desperate for attention, desperate to be heard. An officer called out, announcing themselves. No answer, just the tapping. They followed the sound to a closed door, the master bedroom. And when the door swung open, the scene inside would haunt investigators for years. There, on the floor, lay the body of 39-year-old Laura Carter, a devoted mother, a loving wife, a woman adored by everyone who knew her. She was motionless, pale, and cold. The sight was brutal enough to shock even the most seasoned officers, but there was something even more disturbing. There were no signs of a break-in, no clear struggle, and no obvious enemy who might have wanted to harm her. It looked like a crime committed by someone who knew the house, someone who knew her. In the corner of the room, curled up near the wall, sat her 12-year-old daughter, Chloe. Her hands were shaking, her clothes stained with tears. She stared blankly at the officers, unable to speak, and when one of them tried to approach her, she whispered the same haunting phrase she had said on the phone moments earlier, "Something terrible has happened." As paramedics escorted the young girl out, investigators began surveying the house. What startled them most was the absence of Laura's husband, Daniel. His car was in the driveway. His jacket hung by the door. His wallet was on the kitchen counter. But he was nowhere inside. The house felt untouched, yet he had vanished. Neighbors were questioned immediately. Many said they had heard arguments between the couple over the last few weeks. Nothing extreme, but enough to raise eyebrows. Others claimed the Carters were under pressure financially, even though they never showed it publicly, and some mentioned that Daniel had been acting distant recently, often leaving the house late at night without explanation. As investigators pieced together the timeline, they realized something chilling. The last confirmed sighting of Daniel was earlier that evening, just before the neighbors heard the scream. Back at the police station, young Chloe was finally able to speak. Her voice cracked as she explained what happened inside the room. She had been in her bedroom reading when she heard her parents arguing. She didn't go to the door. She was used to small disagreements between them, but something about her mother's voice this time made her heart race. She sounded afraid, Moments later, she heard a loud crash. She rushed toward the master bedroom but froze in the hallway. She saw her mother fall. She saw someone standing over her. Someone she knew, someone she trusted. But when investigators gently asked her to identify the person, Chloe broke down crying. Through her sobs, she whispered, "I don't know if I'm allowed to say it." That single sentence sent shivers through the team. They didn't want to push her too hard, but the implication was impossible to ignore. The person she saw may have been a family member, maybe even her own father. Meanwhile, the search for Daniel intensified. Police checked hotels, highways, parking lots, even rental car agencies. Nothing. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. But investigators knew better. No one simply vanishes after something like this unless they're trying to hide. As the night went on, a chilling clue emerged. One of the officers reviewing the security footage from a neighbor's camera spotted something unusual. At around 9:43 p.m., the exact time the scream was reported, a car sped away from the Carter residence. The headlights were off. The driver's face was not visible. But the car was a perfect match for Daniel's secondary vehicle, a car he rarely used. That discovery changed everything. Investigators suddenly had a suspect. A father who had vanished. A husband seen leaving the scene at the exact time his wife was killed. A man who had motive, opportunity, and the chance to escape. But the biggest question remained: why would a man who claimed to love his family commit something so monstrous? And what secret was he so desperate to hide that it pushed him over the edge? The truth, as detectives would soon uncover, was more disturbing than anyone expected. As dawn began to rise over the neighborhood, investigators were still inside the Carter home, trying to piece together a motive that made sense. On the surface, the situation pointed to one conclusion: Daniel Carter killed his wife and fled. But something about the case felt too clean, too conveniently arranged, as if the truth was hiding beneath layers of misdirection. Detectives sensed that the simplest answer might not be the right one, and soon, their instincts would prove frighteningly accurate. While officers continued searching for Daniel, a forensic team discovered something strange in the master bedroom. A faint mark on the bedroom window frame. It looked like someone had touched it with a gloved hand. It wasn't enough for a clear print, but it was enough to raise suspicion. If Daniel was fleeing in a panic after harming his wife, why would someone else's gloved handprint be on the window? And if he really escaped through the front door to his car, why did the window frame show signs of being slightly lifted and then shut again? This new detail triggered a shift in the investigation. Detectives started revisiting every assumption. Had Daniel really fled? Or had something else happened to him? If someone else had been in the house, who were they? And why had they targeted this family? Meanwhile, 12-year-old Chloe, now staying in a protected room at the station, had calmed down enough to talk again. A trained child specialist sat with her, gently asking what she saw. Chloe hesitated, took a shaky breath, and finally managed to say something chilling. The person who hurt my mum wasn't my dad. It was someone else. Someone who looked like him. The investigator paused, confused. Someone who looked like him. A relative. A neighbor. A stranger with similar features. Chloe continued, describing a tall man wearing dark clothes, a cap pulled low, and gloves. His face was partially visible, and in the chaos, in the shock, she thought it was her father at first. But after watching the security footage of Daniel from earlier that evening, she realized what she saw wasn't the same man. This changed everything. If Chloe was telling the truth, and investigators believed she was, then Daniel might not be the killer, but a victim too. Perhaps he had been taken. Perhaps he had been forced to leave. Or perhaps someone wanted the world to think he was responsible. Hours later, a major breakthrough arrived. When police found Daniel's secondary car, abandoned near a wooded area outside town. The engine was cold. The keys were still inside. But Daniel wasn't there. Instead, something far more disturbing was discovered. A set of footprints leading into the woods, then stopping abruptly near tire tracks from another vehicle, one that didn't match any car registered to Daniel or the family. It was becoming clear that someone orchestrated this disappearance. The case took a dark turn when detectives dug into Daniel's past. searching for someone who might want to frame him. That's when they discovered a detail that had never come up before. A former business partner named Rick Nolan. A man who had once been extremely close to Daniel, almost like a brother, but who had cut ties with him after a bitter fallout involving fraud accusations. Daniel had reported Rick for illegal financial activity, resulting in Rick being convicted and serving time. Rick had been released from prison just 6 months earlier. Investigators now had a potential suspect, with motive, anger, and a ruined life to blame Daniel for. They checked Rick's known addresses, but he had recently moved without updating records. No one knew where he was living, and he hadn't been seen in weeks. His disappearance aligned suspiciously with the timeline of the crime. Later that evening, detectives uncovered one more essential piece of the puzzle, a neighbor's smart doorbell camera, which hadn't uploaded footage earlier due to a connectivity issue, finally synced to the cloud. In the recording at exactly 9:41 p.m., 2 minutes before the scream, a car drove slowly past the Carter house. It wasn't Daniel's, and it wasn't any car registered in the neighborhood either. Zooming into the footage, investigators saw a distorted but unmistakable face. It was Rick. This discovery sent waves of urgency through the case. It wasn't just a family tragedy, it was a revenge plot, crafted with precision. Rick had chosen the night carefully, watched the family closely, studied their routines, and waited for the perfect moment when Daniel was home. Unaware of the horror that was about to unfold, he entered the house through the slightly lifted window, wearing gloves and dark clothing, attacked Laura, and made sure to leave behind just enough clues to make Daniel look guilty. He then forced Daniel into his own secondary car, drove it far away, and transferred him into another vehicle. What happened to Daniel after that remained unknown, and investigators feared the worst. But the true twist came when police finally located Rick's abandoned apartment. Inside, hidden behind a removable wall panel, they found a small digital recorder. On it was a chilling audio clip. A man's voice trembling, pleading, clearly under duress. It was Daniel. His voice cracked as he begged, "Please, you don't have to do this. My family has nothing to do with what happened years ago. Let them go. Let my daughter go." Rick's voice responded with cold anger. "You took everything from me. Tonight I take everything from you." The recording ended abruptly, leaving investigators in stunned silence. There was no more room for doubt. Daniel had never been the killer. He had been the target. A carefully planned setup forced upon him by a man consumed by vengeance. And yet, even with this revelation, one dreadful question remained unanswered. Was Daniel still alive? A county-wide manhunt began. Helicopters scanned the woods. Officers searched abandoned structures, and drones flew over marshlands. Hours felt like days. Finally, in a remote storage facility several miles away, officers found a locked unit registered under a fake name. Inside was a scene that made every officer hold their breath. Daniel was there, barely conscious, tied to a chair, weak but alive. He had endured hours of torment, but he had survived long enough for help to arrive. Rick Nolan, however, was nowhere to be found. He had vanished again, slipping through the cracks like a ghost, leaving behind destruction, trauma, and a family that would never forget what he did. As Daniel was rushed to the hospital, Chloe ran to him the moment she saw him. Despite everything she had witnessed, she held on to him tightly, knowing the truth at last, that her father wasn't the monster she feared he might be, but a victim who fought silently for his family even when he couldn't save his wife. In the end, the Carter family would never be whole again. A loving mother was gone, a father broken but alive, and a daughter forever changed. The crime wasn't just about revenge. It was about the unraveling of a happy home destroyed by one man's obsession with payback. And although Rick remains at large, one chilling reality lingers. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the shadows of the past, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.